Hello there. Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility since 2005. Now, today we are talking about the challenge of being stuck. And I invited therapist and author Bridgit Dengal Gaspard on to discuss her new book, The Final Eighth, Enlist Your Inner Selves to Accomplish Your Goals. So in this episode, we talk about how we get stuck in trying to achieve our dreams, right? We get to like that final step and we just don't take it. What are our inner selves? How to know when it's time to let go? And what is safe success? So I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. So before we dive in, I just want to check in and see how your new year is going. I hope things are feeling, well, as tranquil as possible. And, and I also hope that you are being gentle with yourself, because I know that it is, it's hard at the beginning of the year. We have all these dreams, all these wishes, all these hopes. And, then we get kind of towards the end of January and we're like, how is that playing out? What was that word of the year? Or what was that theme? And I hope that you're still keeping all of that kind of close to your heart and or letting it evolve. A quick favor, if you will hit subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode of Tranquility du Jour, would love that. And if you have a moment to write a review or hit the 5-star button, would also really appreciate that. For more episodes of Tranquility du Jour, head on over to kimberlywilson.com/podcast, and you'll find a link to everything, including an app so that you can have Tranquility du Jour with you on the go at all times. And anyone who might be new, a huge welcome. And you will find out more about Tranquility du Jour at kimberlywilson.com/new. Are you looking for ways to connect, practice, create, grow, and reflect with a group of like-hearted ladies? Well, I have just the perfect opportunity for you, which is the Tranquility du Jour Passholder Collective. So basically, a pass holder is someone who has access to all the events that are currently scheduled. And they range from TDJ Live Masterclasses to virtual retreats, which are half-day retreats happening each season, planning your year sessions for 2021 and 2022, private pop-up events, 12 virtual co-creating sessions where we get together and we have an hour of focused time working on something that is creative and important to us, along with weekly prompts for Year of Tranquility and also weekly prompts for Tranquility du Jour tenets. So living these tenets, how do we actually bring these into manifestation in our everyday lives? And then books, all sorts of fun things. All right. So what I wanted to share, though, is one of the emails that I got from a participant who said, I'm beyond excited for this year's TDJ Annual Passholder Collective. Thank you for the amazing New Year's retreat, which you get a replay of. And thank you in advance for everything to come. You're already making my 2021 dreams come true. Now, the thing about the pass, too, that I want to mention that makes it just great is you don't have to get these things all a la carte, right? It just makes it super easy. You sign up for this pass and then voila, you are included in all of these offerings. In addition, with our private community, we are not on Facebook. All right. So we are in a private platform that's beautiful, super easy to use, and even comes with an app. So you can connect on the go, but not be distracted by everything that is on Facebook. So I want to leave you with one other quote that just really touched me that I received early on. And she writes, I realize it's been less than a week, but I have to tell you how excited I am. Thanks to my action plan and following the TDJ lifestyle, I'm returning to my disciplined roots. I'm writing every day. Thanks to my action plan, I have more energy and am willing to commit to my writing. I've been in a funk for so long, and this past year was like a cloud hanging over me that I couldn't get away from. So when you came along with the annual pass, I saw a ray of sunshine on the horizon. I took a chance. It's like a weight has been lifted. Oh, it just like warmed my soul when I received this. And I also wanted to mention, in addition to everything I've named, you're also going to be getting some snail mail love notes. Yes, even if you're in Australia and Paris, where I have been sending them so far, and of course, Canada. But in addition, you are going to get a private class with my ballet teacher, and I cannot wait to do that. And that's happening on February 7th. So there's a lot of fun additional pieces that I'm throwing into this. The doors close at the end of January on the 31st and will not reopen until December. So if you are interested, please head on over to KimberlyWilson.com/2021 for all the details on the Annual Pass Collective. Hope to see you there. All right, now without further ado, Bridgit, she is the author of The Final Eighth and the founder of New York Voice Dialogue Institute. She's a former performer who earned a master's degree from Columbia University and teaches at numerous professional settings, including Omega Institute. She lives in New York City, where she maintains a thriving private practice. Visit her online at final8th.com. Welcome, Bridgit.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
It's a treat to have you, and congrats on your new book, The Final Eighth. You have a copy too?
Yes, yes. I'll echo your copy. And
listeners, and with a Post-it. Listeners, we are both holding up a copy of her beautiful book, and it says, Enlist Your Inner Selves to Accomplish Your Goals. So I have to ask you, let's start with this title. What is the Final Eighth?
So the Final Eighth is failing inside of victory. It's for people that are hardworking, talented, creative, and on their way, constantly strategizing, doing all the right things, and suddenly stall right in front of the victory. And it's a mystery, and it's health or relationships, career, finances. It doesn't matter. And that's the Final Eighth. And it came up in my practice. I literally came up like, oh my gosh, that's the Final Eighth. When client after client that I had that I knew was working hard, and it didn't matter what field, creative fields, lawyering, banking, so many people would come up against this like, wait a minute, I didn't understand what was happening. They didn't. Why this sudden stall? And also it's so painful. And it came out, wow, it's the Final Eighth. These are people who got 7/8 of the way there. And it's a mystery. What's going on? And that's when I really started to dig in. Of course, I had my own Final Eighth issues. I just hadn't labeled it as such. But as you know, if you can label something, you're halfway to finding out solutions. And that's literally the Final Eighth.
Yeah, beautiful. I totally agree with you. The ability to label, the ability to name something is so powerful to understand it, because kind of being in that murky middle is so uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And then I do this work called voice dialogue. And so that's where we talk to different parts of ourselves and honor that each part within us has wisdom. And that's the subtitle. So the book is really a step-by-step guide that helps the readers use voice dialogue to and eventually enlist the inner selves that actually help you cross the finish line.
Beautiful. Well, so tell us a little bit about your journey to writing this book. So you mentioned that you got to the seventh, stage and then you're like, what else is there?
Exactly. I used to joke that I was still working on finishing my book on not finishing. Now I'm finished. So the wider answer to your question about how did I get here is that I was a performer in New York City and for a long time, and I did comedy and writing and performing and did all kinds of production jobs as part of that. And in that era, I was looking for creativity tools, and I stumbled upon this thing called voice dialogue. And it was created by Doctors Hal and Sidra Stone, who came out of California, or that's where they developed the voice dialogue. And I hunted them down because it just electrified me. I only read about it in another book, and I'm like, this is amazing stuff. So I hunted them down, which meant I got the 1-800 number and started getting voice dialogue for myself. So really starting to get to know my own inner selves. And the voice dialogue method is that our healthy personality consists of many selves. So this is about healthiness and also to get a larger sense of who you are. And so as a performer, I adored it for simply that reason. So in auditioning or just figuring out something comedically, I could enter different parts of myself, the wacky, flighty self or the strong self. But the more I got into it and started to get training in how to be a facilitator of voice dialogue, I saw the healing happen so fast that when people embodied parts of themselves, especially parts they've been afraid of, they really transformed because they got the visceral sense that I'm much more than I think I am. I'm much more than I originally gave myself permission to be. And so I eventually went back to school. I became a private practice therapist because I went and got my master's, because I got so interested in the healing aspect that I moved away from the performing and started to do the voice dialogue. And then it was my private practice. I suddenly had that epiphany, like, this is a thing. I've got these clients that I know worked really hard because I've been with them this whole way and also being puzzled. And that's how I got to sort of marry being a healer with this creativity tool, which is both. And I'm just really happy to be able to bring it to more people. And that's another reason I wrote the book, because it's you don't need to have another person and figure out a schedule to meet. You can pick up the book and do a lot of these exercises on your own.
Yeah, well, no, this is great. And it's like what I love too with chapter 1, it's like your inner selves, not all of you wants what you think you want. And that was like, boom, right? That is a really powerful opening chapter. So can you speak to that? Like, what do you mean?
Yes, right. We think we want that cherished goal with every fiber of our being. But what we really find out is that that's not actually so. And so we have different parts and that are for the goal, and also believe that we're worthy of the goal as well as capable, because those parts might be responsible, even visionary parts, can do parts that say, okay, well, if I need to learn about X in order to be better and bigger in my field, then I'll just go learn and I'll do what needs doing. And then eventually the stuckness is actually a message. And that's the final eighth. And that's when you are up against parts of yourself that have very good reason to be against the goal. That's the other thing. They're not your enemy. They're just difficult, meaning you're in pain. That's why you're seeking help about being stuck. But these parts, from their point of view, have really important reasons. For example, I worked with a client who actually was moving up in the entertainment field as a performer. And I began to realize also this happens when you get yeses from the universe. Yeses are often much scarier than no's. Like, we're kind of used to that. But when you get a yes from the universe, it's like you've got to move into that. You have to lean in and be bigger. So we had already been doing voice dialogue. And so we went to the part that was against her, basically was doing some self-sabotage stuff. When people say self-sabotage to me, I'm like, oh, well, tell me what's going on. I don't necessarily think it's something that needs to be scolded. It's like, all right, I want to meet the part that you're labeling as self-sabotage in terms of your goal. So we went to this part, and this part was not this kind of mean, big part. It was a very regal and kind of quiet part, and leaned in and basically told me, the facilitator, a secret about the client. Said, look, if she goes any further in her career, she's going to go out of control with her drinking and she's going to become an alcoholic. Now, I'd worked with her for a while. This had never come up. She'd never talked about her drinking. And then in the session, my client agreed that that part of her was accurate, that what was going to be demanded was more socializing, more pressure. And she didn't have a way to control her drinking. She wasn't serious about that. So our work shifted completely. And we focused on, how do you do stronger boundaries? How do you say no? How do you get the rest that you need? And all of that stuff. And then it's like the double bind that she was in between the parts of herself that wanted the goal and the parts that said no, melted because their concerns were addressed. That part was not the enemy. That part really was saving her life. And that's an example of finding the wisdom that was hidden to both of us in that particular example.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about like what is voice dialogue and how would one begin to practice this?
So again, it's all in the book. And also at the moment, and we have every third Thursday of the month free voice dialogue demonstrations that I do with my colleague, because obviously it's always easier to see how something works. So that's just going to be ongoing. Anybody can find me online and sign up for the Zoom info. But basically, it's voice dialogue. You start in the center and you go to a different part of the room, or at least move over slightly if you don't have a lot of space. And you go and you embody that self, whatever that is. So if it's a perfectionist, you move over, and then that perfectionist speaks from the I. And I'm, as Bridget's perfectionist, I might say, and Bridget really needs to do this to be better, and she needs that. And all these selves have different rules. So when you're doing voice dialogue, you want to say, yes, please tell me more. You never ask a perfectionist, can you just relax a little and let a few things go? No, perfectionists don't like that. But you always come back to center for a few reasons. One, the perfectionist cannot control your life. It's just part of you. But it's also a part that may have very important standards. So you don't want to throw away the proverbial baby with the bathwater. So you come back to center and you take the parts of the perfectionist that you feel are good for you at this point in your life. Also, energetically and physiologically, you get a sense of where that part lives. And so it just gives you, again, more self-awareness. And then you might go to another self. Let's just say it's the I just want to relax self. And that self has a whole different posture. And you never ask that self, could you just be a little more responsible? No. That relaxed self says, here's my ideal day. I don't get up till 11. I don't get out of bed till 1, or whatever it is. And again, you listen to the wisdom of that self and you come back to center. Now, if that is how you ran your life all the time, you wouldn't get anything done. But if you don't listen to your relaxed self in some very fundamental way, you probably will get sick, because you won't get the rest you need or take the unplugging time that you need. And that's how voice dialogue works. It tunes you into your wisdom. And you often find out that you have old opinions about yourselves. Like maybe you thought the perfectionist was just something to be scared of. Like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to live up to that perfectionist standards. But when you come back to the center, you're like, wow, okay, it's true. I can handle that. I'm never going to live up to my perfectionist standards, but that's like a false goal. I don't want to be a perfectionist. I want to have high ideals that I maintain. And those are very different reasons. So it gives you more flexibility about every aspect of your life.
What I love too is it's like an acceptance of it, right? Versus having your perfectionist in one corner, your relaxed person in another. It's like, how do we bring these parts of ourselves together?
Yes, exactly. And know that they both have wisdom.
They're on the same team, ultimately.
They're on the same team. Thank you. Exactly.
Now, one of the things too that I love is, this is in chapter 2, the Inner Selfie report. So tell us what the Inner Selfie report is.
Yes, I love the Inner Selfie report. So it's an assignment that I give, an exercise, and your listeners can certainly do that. Whenever you think of it, ideally in the morning, and you just jot down what part of you is around at that moment. So like as you're getting ready, say to work, in the old days, you'd actually have to leave your house. But now a lot of people actually have had to embrace different parts of themselves. Maybe you were never that high tech, but then your whole company said, well, we're working from home and you've got to learn Zoom and you have to learn all of those kind of things. So the other thing is you can learn to cultivate selves that you didn't need before, but you keep track. And so then you get a sense of what selves are working through you throughout your day. Kind of like a great metaphor I like to use is when the alarm clock goes off at say 5:30 in the morning and you're sprung awake from a deep, delicious sleep. What parts of yourself are in reaction to that alarm. It's like the responsible one says, okay, let's get out of bed. The rebel says, throw that alarm. I want it broken against the wall. And different parts of you respond to that alarm clock. And that's like the selfie report. Just notice which different parts of you are coming up. You can like the parts, you can not like the parts. Doesn't matter. Just list them. And sometimes I also like to say, do it on a weekend day or basically a non-working day and a working day, because those are also going to be different parts, because different parts of us are welcome in different arenas.
As you were saying this too, I was just thinking, kind of in psychology, right? There's this idea of like our, getting in touch with our younger self, right? And how does voice dialogue kind of play into that? Because I know we've got like, perfectionists, like these different parts of our adult self, but do we ever do a connection to kind of inner child?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the other thing is we feel like there's more than one inner child. So a lot of people mistake the vulnerable, maybe wounded inner child as the only inner child. Now that wounded inner child, and I think everyone has them. Some philosophers will even tell you that's like one of the archetypal purposes of life is whatever that wounding is, that's your life journey. It's the gift, even though it's painful. But so you would go to the inner child in the same way, but you could go to maybe the one that carries some pain, but you could go to the magical inner child. You could go to just the quiet, observant, naive, in the sense that just takes things in. And then with voice dialogue, you don't have to talk. The dialogue could be anything. It could just be energetically breathing in a particular way. So if you did voice dialogue, say with a magical inner child, that inner child you might just have a crayon and just kind of draw. And then when you go back to center, you and your adult self can talk about what happened and what maybe memories you had. But you don't necessarily have to use words when you are with the self, if it's a nonverbal self or a mostly energetic self. And yeah, the inner children, because they're so close to our essence. And when you're building a life that you love, you want that essence. And it's your job to protect it as well. And that's why, like that client who had to learn how to protect herself better if she was going to get bigger in her professional field, was also having to protect her inner children much more effectively. Otherwise, those parts would have really been hurt.
When, of course, we have the holidays coming up, right? And whenever we think about protecting ourselves, it feels like it's something that I work with a lot of clients before they're dealing with family, right? Of like protection. And, with this political climate and what have you, it's like we all need a little protection. And even I was recently talking with a client about putting on her emotional PPE, right? It's like, so, kind of thinking about with that here, and with that client that you encouraged, okay, to learn how to really protect yourself. What are some tips that you might give our listeners who could use a little protection, even with all this Zoom like interaction, even though it's so lovely? I think for a lot of people, they're getting Zoom fatigue, and it's just, we do need a lot of energetic protection right now from everything that's going on.
Absolutely. So in terms of like ways that people can protect themselves, right? Just the era that we're in, and then also the impending holidays. And I think a good one is to be aware of the selves that might be in pain or even anticipatory pain, in the sense that, what if you're someone who loves your holiday season and your family is magically all fabulous? You may not even get to have that wonderful time because we don't know yet what gatherings are going to be safe. And so a lot of the protection is, as you get to know yourselves, you get to know their expectations. And then it's not negative thinking, but you're like, all right. And you kind of plan in advance. Sometimes I say, bring your own toy box, so that the little parts of you that are going to be disappointed because either it's something like an old family argument once again rears its ugly head, and that's really hard. And here it is once again Thanksgiving, and this unfortunate thing is happening. You can still comfort the inner children in you that are upset, but have your exit plan. If you need to arrive late, leave early, But that's one way I would say, be aware of the expectations and then help yourself. Don't ask people to do something they've never done before to suddenly this year do the right thing. That's magical thinking, and it's okay to have that, but not okay. It's not protecting yourself if you're like, I'm just going to do my magical thinking and I'm going to hope the same uncle doesn't start the same conversation that upsets my mother. Then there's the argument. If it happens every year, it's probably going to happen this year. I don't know if that addresses what you were asking.
No, it does. I mean, I think what it reminds us too is to focus on what you can control, right?
Yeah,
Which is so important right now. So one of the things too, as you talk about getting to this final eighth, is like really thinking about, okay, what is stopping us? What keeps us from actually getting to that goal or completing the project? And, one of the things you said earlier, sometimes it's like, well, it's just not, you're not meant to do that, right? But what if you are? Like, what is it, that's stopping us?
So a few things. When you're stuck, it's so painful. And I always say, think of that, be grateful for the pain because it's telling you something's not working and it's important to you. It would not be this painful if it wasn't also important. And so going in and figuring out what is going on can help address what you just asked. So one of the things that people do is when they're in pain, then the selves in them that believe their core negative beliefs, they equate the pain as proof that they're not good enough or they aren't lovable or some terribly painful core negative belief. They're all terribly painful. And so one way is to say, okay, maybe there are parts of you that are believing that you're still not the one to move forward, that somehow you're not good enough. So you can do voice dialogue with those parts and embrace them, but also catch them up to current events, that it's not true that you're unlovable. It may be true that you were made to feel that way. It may be true that you made decisions you regret as if you were unlovable, but it's not true. Core negative beliefs are always false. And so that's one way to see if the parts that are hanging on to being stuck as opposed to crossing the finish line may actually have a distorted loyalty to the early caregivers that told them life doesn't work out. And it's a double bind if you're like, wait, if I cross this finish line, then my whole underground philosophy of life is wrong. Like if it works out for me, then it's not true that things never work out. And even though that doesn't make logical sense, emotionally, you have to untie that knot. And so that's a big part of it. And then the other part is sometimes it's you simply don't have the skills, but you have to be willing to be a beginner. So you could have all these cells that get you 7/8 of the way there, but the skills you need to move further are not your tried and true skills. And I've had, again, this happen to people across the board in types of careers. So they know how to work hard. They know how to, strategize, double down. But often what they need to do is be a little more vulnerable, maybe make more connections and let go of the machine parts of themselves and the tough parts. And that, in fact, to move forward, they have to admit that they don't know something and have someone teach them. And so a lot of times it's that people have to get in touch with much more vulnerable parts of themselves, paradoxically, to be the victor that crosses the finish line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As you were talking about kind of, that stuckness too, like I just had this visual, I've got this, this flower bed in the backyard, a raised flower bed that went wrong. And so it's just filled with roots from a tree and it never grew anything, but it's filled with roots. And so it's just this bundle of soil and roots, right? And it's just like, that to me is like what stuckness feels like, right? It's like, it's rich, it's fertile, there's soil, but it's just filled with, muck, right? And then you can't even break it up.
That's beautifully put. And then the question is, what do you want to grow there? What has to leave? What do you have to let go of to make room for the bed to hold? That's beautiful. And it takes work. What you just described, it's not going to flower without you putting in work. And I think that's the other part. But people confuse work with working hard, and it's not always working hard at all. Sometimes it's the opposite. The work is letting go, and maybe even just sitting and meditating and waiting to see what does that flower bed need, or I'm stuck. Let me just sit in the muck and think, let my intuition whisper, what else is happening? Because it's not making logical sense. Okay, great. So then let's go to the illogical side, the non-rational, the intuitive.
Well, and this idea too of letting go is my next question. It's like, how do you know when it's time to let go, right? When you're like, okay, is it the final eighth, or is it like mama just needs to let this go, right? It's just not meant to be. It's something that I'm holding on to that is just causing me a lot of pain and the stuckness and the suffering. When do you know to let it go? And I think sometimes, and tell me what you think, Bridgit, but I think sometimes it's like it becomes visceral. Like you just know you can no longer do this job anymore. You can no longer be in this relationship anymore, or what have you, right? Like you feel it in your bones. But I'm just curious what you have found, to be like, okay, this is the signal that it's time to let go.
Yeah. And what you brought up is that also the courage it takes to listen to your visceral signal, because it often does. That your outer circle expects you to be one way, and suddenly you have to let them know, frankly, sorry, I'm not going to be that way anymore. And so when I was writing this book, I realized, all my chapters are in a way for the type A personalities. You can do this. And I thought, I got to have a chapter devoted to letting it go. So I have a whole chapter devoted to leaving this goal, because I needed this book to be for those that it's not just go for your goal because you said so. And so sometimes you don't know. You can't be positive, and other times you do know. And the idea is, if it doesn't fit anymore, again, being aware. It's not even or. Sometimes it takes grieving. Like you really wanted the thing, but it's past your time or its time. And to have the strength about that. And also, if you let go, and you find yourself longing for it again, maybe what you really had to let go was your strategy and relationship to the goal. And when you change that, you can go pick up the goal in a much healthier and more productive way. And I think also I talk about practicing safe success. And that's like managing when we decide to let go of something. Sometimes people in your circle are also attached. Oh, really? They don't mean badly. They want to be supportive, but you've worked so hard, or you've been at it so long, or the, ABD, the all but dissertation. People spend so much time researching towards their doctorate, but they never actually finish their paper and graduate. And so if you decide after 10 years, you know what, I really, that was then, this is now, and I don't want to finish it, a lot of your circle will say, are you sure? You could 6 more months. And maybe it's like, yeah, but I don't want it anymore. So I think sometimes managing other people's responses that they're having out of love, that's part of what you have to do. Like you said, awareness before. So much of this is about different types of awareness.
And what I think is hard really about awareness, and I'm curious if, what you think, and too with clients you've worked with, or even with yourself, it's like hitting the pause button long enough to be aware, right? I mean, that's one of the, I hate to say there's a blessing in COVID, but it is one of the blessings in a way of it's made us so much more aware of the craziness, the chaos, in which we were living our lives. And not that that's still not happening to some degree, but, our worlds have been shrunk so much. And so, how does one find the time and ability really to make that connection, that awareness? It's like, I think we get it intellectually, but I don't know that it's easy in one's day to day to notice all of this. What do you think?
I completely agree. As you were asking, I just had this flash of parents of young children.
Yes.
Who already were so busy. And then now they have to add being a homeschooling maven. So I just want to acknowledge that people's schedules some of us have had a little loosening because we don't have to commute. Others of us have had more work than they ever predicted in their lifetime. But I think in either case, unplugging, even if it's like when you have to go to the bathroom, you say, okay, I'm going to go to the bathroom, but then I'm going to spend 10 seconds. Even as you wash your hands, make that a mindfulness exercise. So you get out of your head. And so you just feel the water on your hands and let your hands tell you where the water is and what the temperature is. And so is that going to be enough to completely like rethink your life? Maybe not, but it's the small habits where you at least get a visceral sense of what I call unplugging. And that you can do. But again, it's about being aware. And I'm a believer in helping your environment help you remember your next chapter. So you could put a sign up like on your own home bathroom door, like don't forget to wash your hands, especially if you have kids. But then you could put in mindfully, as in like quotes or something. And that's really maybe more for the adults, so that you can use some of these rituals that are just you don't even think to say, oh, I'm going to use this ritual to actually bring myself to the present moment, unplug, meaning leave my brain and let it be a physical sensation. And ideally, the pleasure that comes from that, the little oasis of serenity, is also going to motivate you to say, okay, let me move into breathing for a minute, and expanding that. Because the truth is, when you unplug, we hit other areas of our brain. And sometimes that's when the brainstorm comes. So I like to tell people, as busy as you are, it's actually more efficient for you to take a mindfulness break, because your brain, which has a whole lot more problem solving capacity than you're aware of, could actually be more efficient. And that often gets my type A'ers to say, really? It's more efficient? All right, I'll do it.
Totally. All about the efficiency. Yes.
Yes.
Well, is there anything else that you want to mention with regard to your book before I move into my last question? Because I was going to ask you about safe success, but you've already kind of touched on that. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to say, but, anything else kind of with enlisting our inner selves to accomplish our goals?
I would say a lot of us have already done work on ourselves. And I really wanted a book that took all of that into account. And so the idea of enlisting your inner selves is for you to get different angles on something that you may already know. And that's good. Like I would never want anyone to throw out the wisdom they already have. It's using the wisdom you have and turning it a little upside down. Like, what is the gift of your inner critic? Not just what's bothering you about your inner critic. So I would say that my book and the exercises in it, some are quite fun. So it's not about always doing chores, and turning things upside down so you can go, oh, I never thought of it that way before. That just opens up so much more possibility.
And possibility is something I think we could all use a little bit more of right now.
Oh, yes.
So my last question for you, Bridgit, is the name of the podcast, of course, is Tranquility du Jour. And so I'd love to ask my guests, how do you, and particularly now with everything that's going on, how are you finding tranquility in your everyday?
One of the ways I find tranquility, which I didn't think of until I thought about your question, meaning I do this every day and I have for a long time. And I realize it gives me tranquility, which is dance. I put on the music, but I actually love dancing so much, I don't even need music. And so I put on music and I just dance. And you can make two different choices. One, you can dance how you feel and you put on music that you feel like hearing, because that certainly changes your mood. But sometimes you can put on music that is really what your inner rebel or some other part, acting out part of you wants. And I remember years ago, I used to dance as I got ready for work, a job I basically liked, to I Don't Want to Work, I Just Want to Bang on My Drums All Day by Todd Rundgren. If you know that song, it's amazing. But that part of me that didn't want to do routine, that was just, I don't want to work. And I would love that song and I would dance to it. And then my inner rebel had a total fun morning. And then I very happily went to work. So that's a tranquility that is quite active. And it really always, and to this minute, makes me feel better if I'm just going to get up and at least dance.
Movement is so good for you. I've been doing ballet for a few years again, but in the pandemic, daily, with and it's just movement is so amazing. It's beautiful. And it's challenging, to like choreography and what have you. So I love dance. I love that you said that. I don't think anyone has said dance yet with regard to that question. And
Oh,
yeah,
good.
it's beautiful.
But also thanks for making me think about it, because I never put it together with tranquility. I put it together with fun and all kinds of things. But actually, when I turn that music off, I'm in a much more tranquil place. Because you're right, movement literally moves you through.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so, and right now with Zoom land, we're just sitting so much like throughout the day, right? And so it's like to actually get up and move and, to do little stretch breaks or do little dance breaks in between things. This is so powerful.
I agree.
Well, thank you so much, Bridget. It's been so fun to have you on the show, and congrats on this book.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks for having me. It has been fun.
You can find Bridget on Facebook. It's Bridgit Gaspard, Bridgit Gaspard. Also on Twitter, same on Instagram, and on YouTube. And I've got a link to all of this for you in the show notes. Also, let's stay connected throughout the year. I would love, love, love that. And you can find the TDJ Insiders Facebook group, of course, over on Facebook. And we have an online book club. And this month we are reading Tina Turner's Happiness Becomes You. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have. And also, if you would like to get love notes, weekly doses of love, invites, and inspiration, would love to meet you in your inbox with these on a weekly basis. Also, there's a link to my 6 books and planner, ways to find me on social, and then a link to my seasonless, vegan, locally made, eco-friendly fashion TDJ. So, in closing, I just want to say I hope you are doing well. I hope you're taking very good care of yourself. And I hope that this podcast was inspiring. And I thank you for inviting me and my guest into your home today. Wishing you a wonderful week ahead. Namaste.